I started recording. Let's start right now. And if other people join, uh, we can, you know, we can kind of summarize. And we will, let's go through this slide package and try to finish and see. I'm going to share my screen right now. You all can see my screen?
Yeah.
All right. It's just a slide package, right? You can see, right? Slides.
Yeah, we can see.
Okay. So let's go through this one, and we went through all these things last time, and basically the key thing that we had to concentrate on this three main settings: influence, exposure, ISO, shutter speed, and aperture. I think we went through the ISO and aperture part. And then I don't know whether we went through, you see, if you look at this, this slide, this is a very, very important slide. One of the key things that you need to concentrate and check if you are using a digital camera, DSLR camera, setting the aperture and how the aperture changes the distance of focus. Because when you take a picture, you have to really, really concentrate on communicating something. Okay, it's not taking just a picture. It's a way of communicating. So when you communicate, you need to focus in the areas that you want to communicate. All right. Whether you want to communicate only one, focus only one part or longer part. If you look at this one, you want to show the all three objects here, or single one, or some, something like that. You have to think about that one and set your aperture, right? And the
Clive,
yeah.
Clive, this look, the very first one,
yeah,
the f2.8 and f4, right?
Right.
That the lady is not clearly seen.
Right. Yes.
Right. So I thought that when you're at a lower end, they should be more clear.
Because this is here we talked about aperture is when you set the aperture determines the depth of field. Depth of field means the depth of the focus area. So here in this case is 2.8 means the aperture is fully open. That fully open means the depth of field is very, very low, shallow depth of field. If the aperture is very, very, very small, means that small in the sense the hole is very, very small, that means is f22, then it's a very small, like a pinhole, right? And then the focus area is really long, really big. So you can focus from about number 2 to number 9, 10. The whole area is in focus. So when you
that's not meters, isn't it? That's not meters. That's just a scale. So
it's just a scale. It's not meters. I mean, if you want to decide about the meters, you need to talk about specifics. What kind of lens that you're using and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. Now, one thing I can tell you, if you are taking a landscape, you are sitting somewhere and looking at a big, nice landscape with mountains, waterfalls, or something like that, then in that case, you want to make sure everything is in focus, right? So that time you have to make it f22, or normally you don't make it f22. You set it to f8, 12, or something like that to make it a bigger area. Okay, but if you like to take a bird or a sports, somebody's playing a football or something like that, only a specific distance, then you set it up for f-stop very, very low. That means you have to fully open, which means that you have to adjust the focus point to your subject. So those are some of the things that you need to set it and practice and use it with the camera. Okay. And that is the f-stop. And it's the same way the shutter speed. Shutter speed also is very, very important.
So f2.8 Manyang is numeric, it's a numeric value, right? 2.84, right?
Yes.
So what it really means is the focal point 2.8?
No. The aperture.
Yeah.
How can I say? Now I have a camera.
Yep.
Right. I mean, you can see inside the lens, there's another round, right? It's your your iris. You know, there's a small, within the black ball, there's a small iris, right?
Yeah.
That iris opens and closes. If the light is, if you are in a very bright area, you will see that is very, very small because it controls the light coming into the nerves in your eye. It's exactly the same way in the lens also. So if you really look at it, you change the aperture setting and you will see this, and I cannot show it here. It's not really, it's difficult, but if you take a camera, you will see if it is f2.8 and it's kind of is fully open, the whole area is open. But if it is set it to 22 or higher value, the aperture is very, very small. That means it's closing the whole thing. So light going in is very low. If it is 2.8, light going in is very low. This means that if you want to get a nice picture, you need to keep the shutter open for a longer period. If you get a lot of light, you don't need, you can have a very fast shutter. Shutter opens and closes immediately. You see, because you have enough light to expose, to get the correct exposure. So those are the things that as a photographer, these are the key things that you need to think about. These three things: the ISO, the shutter speed, and the aperture. Do you understand? I mean, this is a really important thing, Kapila. Now, if you look at the lens, in all the lenses, I don't know that I can show you here. Well, I don't know whether I can show you here. It says here aperture. Now these lenses are a little bit expensive lenses, and this lens is 2.8 all the way. That means this is a zoom lens. Let me get out from my. I cannot get out. Anyway. This is a zoom lens, and you can see I can zoom it from 70 to 200, and normally when you do this zooming, the aperture value is automatically going up. Means that when it is low, the aperture is 2.8. When it is completely zoomed, aperture is high. But this lens, this particular lens, adjust the optics in a way all the zoom positions, aperture is 2.8. It's a constant aperture, and these are expensive lenses. Now I used I mean, I just bought this recently, but I used other lenses that has aperture changes depending on the zoom. Now you said you bought a long lens, right?
I think that's what I have.
Yeah, you need to look at that one, or if you bring it next time, we can check it out.
Okay.
The zoom, the focal point is moving from Now this particular lens focal point is moving from 70 to 200. Okay, but aperture is constant. But maybe there's another one. Let me get you another one. I have another lens here. This is also a very expensive lens, but this one is going from 100 to 500, right? This is the one I normally use for wildlife, and this lens, you see, it moves, and when it moves to the 500 position, aperture is going to be 7.1, and the lowest position is 4.5. Now it's 4.5, and once I move to the highest position is 7.1. So it varies. That means when I take a far away thing, the light coming in is very low. That means I had to shoot it in a kind of a daylight time. Otherwise, I had to change the ISO. You see, when I'm shooting a bird in the kind of a darker inside the trees, to get the proper lighting, I had to change my ISO. I had to increase my sensitivity. So these are the three variables that we have to juggle with, so that we can get the good exposure. All right. I mean, I know I'm willing to talk more and more if you ask questions, right? Otherwise,
no, carry on, Majang. So definitely we'll come back.
Right. The shutter speed is again another thing. Shutter speed is the amount of time the shutter is open. So shutter is normally closed, and when you click, it opens and closes. Right? It's a shutter opens and closes. Let the time light go in and then closes it. So that is the normal digital SLR camera. But nowadays, in a kind of a cell phone, you don't have a shutter. It's a mirrorless techniques, right? And the camera that I have also, this my new camera is a mirrorless. So it doesn't have, it has a shutter, but normally it works with without a mirror. A mirror means, do you understand the mirror?
No, not really. I heard about it, but
okay.
I don't know.
I think I had to explain that one a little bit. Let me do something here. Oops. Where is my I should have removed my background. Okay, anyway, so now in the camera, you have the viewfinder, right? Viewfinder, in a normal camera, let's take the DSLR camera, digital SLR camera. So the light is coming from the lens, and it hits a mirror, it hits a prism, right? Prism, and goes up and comes to the side and show it in the viewfinder. So when you look at something, that thing is directly coming and hit a mirror. Mirror is kind of slanted here 45 degrees, this side, right, inside, and hit that one and light go up, and then you have a prism, and through the prism you view. So the mirror is slanted at 45 degrees here. Okay. So when you put the shutter button, mirror goes up and then closes down. That is the way it works. Actually, mirror goes up, then there's a shutter, comes up and down, and then mirror goes down. Because every time when you see from the viewfinder, you will see what you are shooting in the front. That is the mirrored camera, digital SLR. Now, in these cases, our cell phones and mirrorless cameras doesn't have that mirror. Instead of that one, the light is directly going to the sensor, but through the sensor, electronically gives the same picture to your viewfinder. Okay, and it's electronically gives a shutter. There's a shutter also, and opens and close the shutter, mechanical shutter. And most of these cameras, most of the time, you have a electronic shutter and a mechanical shutter. Mechanical shutter is opens and closes, and then you get a clicking sound. But if you are using an electronic shutter, the mechanical shutter is always open and it electronically times it and take the sensor information within the whatever the specified time. If you are taking 1/100th of a second, that within that 1/100th of a second, you get the light and register that information. Okay, so that is the shutter. Shutter is measured in seconds. The biggest denominator is a fast. Okay, I mean, yeah, shutter is 1 second is very, very long shutter speed. Normally, to shoot a face or people, you can use 1/100th of a second or 1/60th of a second or something like that. Okay, and if you take 1/30th or lower than that, then you have to keep your camera very, very still. Hold it very, very still. Otherwise, you get blurry pictures. If you are taking a handheld camera, you have to have minimum 1/60th of a second or above. When I say above, 1/60th, 100th, 125, and 1/250, like that. Okay. So if you are taking a moving object, if, say for example, if you're taking a bird, a flying bird, or moving the wings, then you have to have 200, 250. If it is a flying bird, maybe 1,000. If you're taking a hummingbird, you have to have 1/2000th of a second. Okay, it's like that. If you are using in a sports event, you have to have very, if you want to get a sharp image, fast moving, you have to have 1/200th or more than that, right? And if the shutter speed is low, you have to have, when I say low, that means 1/30th, 1/15th, or 1/10th, then you have to have a tripod or keep the camera still and shoot it. Okay, shutter speed in camera, we should approximately, okay. I mean, this is the same way.
When we want to really sort of have a when you want to really use a very low shutter speed like 1/30th, right? Because normally if you keep it at 160 or above, right? So
Yeah.
generally it covers a normal human being or baby or then we can go to the birds higher and higher value. But 1/30th, and so that's very small, right? So if a portrait or something like that, perhaps it can be done, right? So that's where we should use if it's a portrait.
You mean
A picture or standstill picture or monument or something like that?
Can you see my another window coming up, or
Not yet.
can you see my other window here? Can you see a bird?
No.
You don't see a bird. Okay.
I don't know. I can't see it. I don't know. What about Padma?
No, I can't see.
Can't see. Okay, okay. I had to. Now I am sharing this only this program, but I can show you the uses of low shutter speed very much. If I'm taking, for example, a very easy example is moon, stars, um, and uh, um, water fountains. You see, if you are taking water, moving water, for example, uh, in a lake or something like that, sometimes you will see waterfalls, you will see smoothie effect. You must have seen that one, right? I can
Yeah,
show you some other
yeah.
thing. Um,
It's almost like this. You don't see the droplets. You see
yes,
the light
yes.
stream light.
To
Yeah.
do that, kind of things, you need to keep the shutter open for a longer period. Okay,
Yeah.
and 1 second, 0.6 seconds or something like that. I mean, if you want, I can show you some other pictures. Um, so the use, there are so many uses of low shutter speed, and also if you are taking, as I said, if you are taking uh, landscape picture, and you want to increase the f-stop, number of f-stop, that means you are making the hole very, very small, right? That means you need to get a longer distance in focus, and shutter is very small. That means if you want to keep the ISO pretty high, if you keep the ISO higher, that means you introduce noise. To keep the ISO at 100 or 50, that means you need to have a longer shutter time, so that you will let enough light come to the camera sensor to get the correct exposure. So that kind of situations, you need to have a tripod. It's very, very important to have a tripod. Okay. We can go through this theory, and I can show you some other examples later. I don't know whether we can do it today, but next time I can show you some examples.
Yep.
Now the shutter speed is also, most of the cameras, you have this button knob that you can change the shutter speed. It's the same way like the aperture. You can change the shutter speed, half a second, 115, 30, 60, 125. It's always doubles. Uh, when I say doubles, now if you think about 1/1000th of a second and compared with 1/500th of a second, the difference is, in 1/500th, you will let double light coming to the sensor. Is the half the time, right? Right?
Yep.
Sorry, it's double the time. Between the last one and the top one is double the time. That means you allow double the light coming to the sensor to burn the sensor, right? It's the same way. It's the same way with the aperture. Aperture, you have different stops, 2.8 and 4. 2.8, you let lot of light coming in. If you change it to f4, that means you make it half the light. Okay, it only the half the light coming in compared with 2.8. When it comes to 5.6, half the light of 4 coming at 5.6. 1/4 is coming compared with 2.8 to 5.6, right? So shutter speed is the same way with the shutter speed. Okay, here's the example. You see, when you take the shutter speed at 2.8, and to get the correct lighting, you have to have 125th of a second. Now you see the water in the waterfall coming down, right? It's a instant picture. But if you change the seconds, number of seconds to 1/10, that means you are exposing, you keeping the shutter open for a longer period. That means a lot of water will fall during that time, and then you get the silky smoothie effect, right? By doing that one, to get the correct exposure, now you see this grass area and this grass area is same. Light come to that one is the same. That is because we change the f-stop to 10. Now here the f-stop is 2.8, but here the f-stop is 10. The f-stop 10 means you reduce, you close the aperture and reduce the light coming in, so that I can increase the seconds. Now it's the same way. F22 is much more smooth, picture here, but the light exposure in all three are almost the same, right? All three are exposed at the same level. But what happened? The number of seconds, this is only half a second. And this is 1/10 of a second, much faster, 5 times faster, right? And this is 125th of a second. You see?
Clive,
Yeah.
Clive, when you put, because in cameras we have the aperture mode and the shutter shutter mode, right? So if you use the shutter mode, right, and if you change the speed, right, does if aperture also
No, you
change
can,
automatically, or you have to select it
I have
separately?
some slides later on to show about that one, okay? If you put it to the aperture priority mode, that means you change the aperture, other things can change. I mean, you fix the aperture,
Yeah.
and other things will change automatically. But if you put it to the timer value, that means the time you set it, and other things will change. Say for example, when I'm shooting a bird on flight, I set the timer value to 1/1000th of a second, right? I keep that one. Now, out of these three variables, I keep one constant, 1/1000th. I don't want to change that one, okay? That is my decision.
Yep.
But then I had to change the other two according to match that one, because the final picture, I need to get the correct exposure. To get the correct exposure, either I had to increase my ISO or my aperture. Now, if I'm taking a bird, I cannot have only the bird's head is in focus. I need to get the complete bird is in focus. So I had to have some distance, right? So because of that, I need to set the aperture also pretty high. Now, out of these three variables, I'm trying to I'm trying to fix two of the variables to my liking. Then I will let ISO free fall, right? Depending on, so when I move the camera, I might point that to a dark area on a tree, or I might point that one to a sky. But in both cases, I change the light conditions. So something has to change from my settings out of these three. That means I had to set the ISO to auto ISO. So this means the ISO camera will change the ISO automatically to get the correct exposure. So those are the two things. For wildlife, most of the time, wildlife and sports, you set the timer value. That means you set the time, because this is important thing for you, right? But for some other things, you set the for portraits, you need to get the complete complete focus. So then you set the aperture value set, right? And and most of the other cases, once you are used to that one, you set it to manual mode. And most of the time, I use it in manual. If most of the time, if possible, I use it in manual mode because I can change it immediately depending on the situation. Right. That is why the camera is important. You need to learn about camera setting, the buttons, and the camera. Most of the time, people say that camera is easy to use because from your finger, thumb, and all those things, you can you have access to these rotating items. You can change these settings immediately. Okay. So that is the shutter speed.
Okay.
Now, when I finish the timing, maybe we have only 10 minutes, and when I finish, we will finish it, and I will have another call next week. If you want to join, I can show you, go through the slide, and or I can show you some of my pictures with different settings. Okay. A good exposure is not always the correct exposure, right? These settings achieve the same exposure, but with significant differences in the image. What are they? So if you have different values, it's not always so good, and depending on that, these same things that we talked about. F16 is a small hole, and to get the correct aperture, you have to expose that one for a longer period. When I say 1/15th is longer, much longer than 1/500th of a second, right? But 1/500th is very fast, but then the aperture is fully open, it's 2.8, okay? But this is something that you need to think about. What happens if I set these things and what kind of a picture I am going to get? Now think about this one, and we talked about this same thing. Now here is the dark picture, and this one is a very bright picture, and but it's a very short time, and this is you will get a sharp picture, but if there are any moving objects or something like that, this is really good, right? So you need to think about that one. It's very difficult to teach these things. You have to learn the basics and then practice it, and you need to get it to your system. Then only you can operate a camera quickly, easily. Histogram is a kind of a graph that you see in the camera, and most of the new cameras has this histogram. Histogram is the amount of light comes into the sensor, right? And basically, if you normally if you want to get a good exposure, you have to have a bell curve like that, right? If you are if you get a higher in this area, that means you have a very dark picture. If you get very high in this area, that means you get an overexposed picture. Okay, so this is the important thing, that depending on this histogram, you can change the aperture, the timing, and all those things, and adjust and get the picture. I mean, this is kind of advanced users, and the best way is to take the picture and look at it. That's why the digital cameras are very good for that, because you can take the picture and look at it and get the feedback immediately, you know. All right. I think you can read this one. The other key component, variable component, is a white balance in the camera. A lot of times you can set this white balance to auto. Okay, white balance is the simplest. The reason we adjust the white balance is to get the color in the image as accurate as possible. Images with different sources of light. Say, if you are taking outside, you get different kind of a sunlight. If you are taking it inside, depending on the light bulb